Well, hello everybody, Roger here, and welcome to my channel, Rogers Reads. So today I'm doing the second part of my October wrap-up. I know it's a couple of days late, it's what, November 2nd? Yeah, but I finally got around to completing the wrap-up, so let's get cracking. So the sixth book that I read in October was What If It's Us by Becky, Abertalli, and Adam Silvera, a collaboration of two authors who I especially enjoyed in the past. Especially they both die at the end, and Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. So this story follows two boys, Arthur and Ben. Now Arthur, who is from Georgia, is visiting New York City for the summer and is working as an intern at his mom's law firm. Ben is recovering from a really bad breakup with his boyfriend Hyttinen and is attending summer school. So Arthur and Ben meet at the post office where Ben is mailing back his ex-boyfriend's things. So the two of them immediately hit it off, but chaos ensues and they end up not getting each other's telephone number. So from there, we follow the two of them as they attempt to find each other, which of course they do. Otherwise, we wouldn't have much of a story, would we? In fact, it almost seemed as though the universe were conspiring in their favor to bring these two together, and the question of destiny came up a few times in the conversation. But it's not an easy ride for our two protagonists. The two of them go through a series of bad dates, all fraught with drama, hurt feelings, and a series of misunderstandings. So there's all sorts of awkwardness and complications, strange relationships between their friends, the relationships between each of the boys and their friends. There's Ben's ex-boyfriend Hudson, who he may or may not be over, and of course, both sets of parents. So Arthur and Ben do embark on quite a roller coaster of a relationship, with them both trying to make it right before Arthur has to leave at the end of the summer. So what I found especially interesting was the friendship dynamics in the book. You know, the author did such a good job with them that I almost found them more interesting than the main romance. I especially enjoyed Dylan's character, who was Ben's best friend, and really quite a lovable character. In fact, I would love to see an entire book featuring him as the main protagonist. So, What If It's Us? The story is told from alternating points of view. So, Arthur gets one chapter, Ben gets the next, and so on. And you know, I actually found this really challenging, as it was often difficult to tell the two boys apart. You know, I don't think their characters were different enough. And because of that, I often forgot who it was who was speaking, so I had to flip back to the chapter heading to see whose chapter it was. So this kind of yanked me out of the story on many occasions, as I had to go back to the beginning of the chapter to figure out whose story I was reading. Now I know that a lot of people hate pulp culture references in their fiction novels, so if you're one of those people, you might want to stay clear of this one. There are numerous references to Hamilton, to Dear Evan Hansen, and lots of Harry Potter. So, pop culture references don't tend to bother me all that much, but I think that they may have overdid it a little bit, especially with the Hamilton references. You know, I found myself thinking a few times, okay, enough already with the Hamilton. So in this way, the book became a tad repetitive in that regard. But all in all, So What If It's Us is a super sweet coming-of-age young adult romance between two boys finding love, and in so doing, discovering themselves in the process. So I ended up liking this story a lot, but not quite loving it as much as I had hoped. You know, I don't know. Maybe I was expecting a little bit more from these two authors. You know, it was cute with likable characters, but you know, it really wasn't earth-shattering. You know, I enjoyed the romance of the two boys, but outside of the romance, there wasn't really a whole lot going on. There really wasn't any additional plot lines or story threads. So though it was an enjoyable story, and I'm glad I read it, I didn't quite love it as much as I had hoped. Now, to be fair, I'm not typically a fan of romancy contemporaries, so I'm probably not the ideal target reader for this. But if you enjoy young adult contemporary novels that are focused on the romance, then you may very well enjoy this book, maybe a little bit more than I did. But all in all, it was a great read. I'm really glad I read it. So the next book that I read this month was a book entitled The Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. So Joe Hill is Stephen King's son, and this is actually my first Joe Hill novel, and I definitely plan on reading a lot more of him in the future. So in the spirit of the Halloween season, I felt the urge to pick up a scary ghost story in October, so I chose The Heart-Shaped Box. And I actually listened to this on Audible. So the story follows an aging rock star, 54-year-old Judas Coyne, who is a collector of macabre objects. So when he sees a notice on an auction site stating that they are selling their stepfather's ghost to the highest bidder, well, how could he resist? So, for $1,000, Jude becomes a proud owner of a dead man's suit, which, so the ad claimed, is haunted by a spirit. So, yeah, that didn't really turn out so well for Jude. So when it arrives, the suit, Jude and his most recent girlfriend, Georgia, whose real name is Mary Beth, he always names his girlfriends from the states they're from, Florida, Georgia, etc. We quickly learn that this suit isn't simply some relics that you can tuck away on the top shelf of your closet and ignore. Nope, this is the real deal. And they soon learn that the ghost's name is Craddock McDermott, and he isn't only impossible to get rid of, he is vengeful and extremely dangerous, and is as scary as hell. So he soon begins messing with their minds and taking over their thoughts, all the while bringing that gleaming razor blade that he dangles on a chain from his bony hand ever closer to them. As it turns out that he was a sadistic hypnotist in life. And you know, I found that part especially terrifying. So how the hell can you battle a ghost who has the ability to take over and control your mind? So from this point on, the story moves with a spine-tingling urgency. So Jude wants the ghost gone, and the ghost wants Jude, and anyone who interferes, dead. So it's difficult to talk too much about this type of book without giving away the story. Let me just say that pretty much every chapter is a battle for survival, and this fast-paced story grows more and more intense and more frightening and vivid. The tension continues to escalate as there's a desperate race to somehow stop this relentless ghost before it kills both Jude and Mary Beth. This is really a haunting that goes to extremes. So the Heart-Shaped Box wasn't just a scary ghost story, it also ended up being a deep and self-revelatory story for our characters, and the author took us on an amazing ride to do so. So as you probably can gather from this video, this was by no means a cute little ghost story. The novel is a gritty, dark, and sinister tale of revenge from beyond the grave, with some gory bits even thrown in. Now, the characters of Jude and Mary Beth were flawed, real, and relatable. And Craddock, well, Craddock is utterly chilling, spine-tingly so. So in this way, the book was an excellent character study as well as a very frightening ghost story. So all in all, I loved this engaging book, though I do admit it scared the hell out of me. It had a clever plot, gripping twists and turns, beautiful prose, and the ultimate creepy villain. So this is the kind of book that makes you want to keep the lights on. So if you like a creepy ghost story, then you might want to check out The Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. So, in keeping with the Halloween spirit, I read another suspenseful book in October entitled An Unwanted Guest by Shari Lapena. So this story follows a group of people who head out to Mitchell's Inn, located deep in the Catskills, for a quiet weekend in the country. It's a perfect place to do some skiing, work on a novel, or simply relax. So being in the middle of winter, the weather takes an abrupt turn for the worst, cutting off power and phone service. So the guests, they make the best of it, settling in and waiting until the roads are cleared until power is restored. But the quiet serenity of the hotel's paradise atmosphere is suddenly broken, however, when one of the guests turns up dead on the bottom of the steps. So it looks like an accident, nothing more than a very unfortunate tumble down the stairs. However, one of the guests believes that the evidence indicates that this was not an accident. So when a second guest shows up dead, this one clearly murdered, the tension is instantly ratcheted up and panic ensues. So fear rises and tensions escalate as everyone is left to wonder, are one of the guests, one of them, the murderer? If so, which one? Or is there someone else hiding in the hotel waiting to pick them off one by one? So more murder follows and tensions and tempers rise even further as nobody is above suspicion, especially when secrets begin to emerge. So nobody can sleep, nobody can trust anyone else as they all wonder which, if any of them, will survive the weekend. So this was an excellent whodunit in the style of Agatha Christie. You know, I really enjoyed getting to know each of the characters along with the backstory as I tried to guess the identity of the murderer, paying attention to all the clues sprinkled along the way. So this alone made the book difficult for me to put down and really drew me right into the story. I really love the fact that the story was told from the point of view of each guest, which really added to the richness of the story, I thought. You know, each character had a distinct personality and backstory that didn't make the point of view switches at all confusing, at least not to me. So each character is fully fleshed out and we end up knowing each of their secrets, their thoughts, desires and hopes. But we don't learn everything. In fact, the author reveals just enough information about each character to make you wonder about their true motivations and their reasons for coming to the lodge. The story was, however, an eerie, tension-filled, and suspenseful story that was fully immersive as we put ourselves in the shoes of the hotel's guests. It wasn't at all graphic or gory, though, just a fun, though unsettling whodunit. So I absolutely loved this book. It was a clever, atmospheric, and fun whodunit with vivid, interesting, and relatable characters, all in a very realistic setting. I mean, how can you not love a murder mystery that takes place in the middle of the woods during a terrible storm? I'm so glad that I went into this book knowing nothing at all about it, and there were plenty of twists and surprises to keep me turning the page. You know, the author did an excellent job at throwing you off track, and I was unable to correctly guess who the killer was, which is good. I hate it when I guess the ending and when I'm only partway through a story. And once everything is neatly tied up at the end, the story continues further on for a few extra pages to reveal an extra squeal-worthy twist that I absolutely did not see coming and that I loved. So Shari Lapena is a new author for me. Haven't read any books by her yet, so I definitely look forward to reading more by her. Oh, and a big shout out and thank you to Viking Press for providing me with an advanced reader copy of this book. So the next book that I read in October was entitled Reincarnation Blues by Michael Poore. So I went into this book knowing absolutely nothing about it. You know, I was browsing at the library and it caught my eye, and after having read the blurb, I loved the concept of the book so much that I picked it up, and I'm really glad I did. So the premise of the story, as you could probably guess from the title, is first we live, first we die, and then we get another try. Well, 10,000 tries actually. So this story follows Milo, who has been reincarnated 9,995 times and is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, soul on earth. He only has 5 lives left to gain perfection, and when he does, he gains his place in a great cosmic soul, gets to become part of the oversoul of the universe. But if he doesn't attain perfection within these next 5 lives, he ceases to exist completely. He just fades away into nothing. But there's also another interesting complication. At the end of every life, he awakes on the bank of the river in the arms of the anthropomorphic manifestation of death, also known as Susie. She prefers Susie, as she doesn't like to be referred to as death. But it is Susie who comes for him as death at the end of every one of his lives. So for millennia, Susie and Milo have loved each other, and they are both facing a future with a kind of dread as Milo's lives count down. So in this way, it's a great love story, though that's not completely the focus of the book. It's also worth mentioning that while he's on Earth living out a life as a human, he has no recollection of any of his other lives, nor does he remember the love of his life, or should I say the love of his soul, who is waiting for him on the other side. His wisdom, however, does tend to grow with each life, so we do get to see an evolution and a progression. And what I found especially fascinating about this book was that the author provides us with small glimpses of many of his incarnations. Several of them, however, are much more detailed, and I found them all absolutely riveting. Now, some take place way in the distant past, while others take place far into the future, some even in space. So what's interesting is that the stories are not in chronological order, so we have no idea where we're going to end up after turning the page. And I thought that the author did an excellent job of weaving all these lives, including Milo's time in the afterlife, into a cohesive story. The author shifted seamlessly and elegantly from one time period to the next. And I really love the fact that if you really screwed up during one of your lives, then you have to live a life of penance, such as coming back as a ladybug or a housefly. Now, of course, the author goes into quite a bit of detail with Milo's 5 remaining lives, and this is where we really get a feel for the kind of person Milo is. But this isn't just about a man's search for perfection. Susie has her own search for meaning, and I enjoyed seeing death evolve as the story unfolded as well. But this book is also about the power of choice and those terribly gray areas between right and wrong. But I don't really want to go into any more detail with this, lest I delve into spoiler territory. But I think one of the reasons that I enjoyed this so much was that the book had a Terry Pratchett-esque feeling to it, especially the humor. Death, who is featured in many of the Pratchett Discworld novels, was one of the main characters in this tale. So Reincarnation Blues was part sci-fi, part fantasy, part dystopian, with a good sprinkling of philosophy and humor thrown in. It was quite a magical and quirky book that makes you think long after the story is finished. It was also wildly entertaining and uplifting, though there are some parts of Milo's lives that were rather brutal and a tad difficult to read about. But all in all, the book was a home run for me, and I ended up loving it. So the last book that I read this month was entitled Summoned to 13th Grave by Dorinda Jones. Now, I was so excited when I received the art for this book. This is the 13th and final book in the Charlie Davidson series. I enjoyed the fact that I finished the 13th book on Halloween 15 minutes before midnight. So hence, it made my October wrap-up. So, I have followed this series since 2011 when Dorinda Jones published the first book in the series entitled The First Grave on the Right. So 7 years I've been with these characters, and the dreaded day finally arrived when I would have to say farewell to them once and for all. So this series follows Charlotte Davidson, also known as Charlie Davidson, who sees dead people, and it's up to her to convince them to go into the light. So when these dearly departed have died under less than ideal circumstances, such as murder, for instance, they sometimes want Charlie to help them solve the mystery of their death and or bring the bad guys to justice. So Charlie has her own investigation business, but as it turns out, most of her clients end up being the dearly departed. So, as the series progresses and the tale unfolds, we meet all manner of interesting characters, ghosts, demons, angels, and even gods. And the main characters of our story have all sorts of surprising secrets, some of which the characters aren't even aware of themselves. Now, you may think that this series sounds spooky. I mean, it has ghosts and demons and all, and I guess it can be in parts. But these books are filled to the brim with humor and snarky comments, which at times caused me to laugh so hard that tears ran down my face. In fact, a couple of times my partner would look at me while I was in the throes of hysterical laughter and ask, "Are you reading Charlie Davidson again?" To which I would have to respond, Now, there is so much more to this story than a young woman who sees ghosts. Hell, it took 13 books to tell this tale. So I can't say too much about it, since I don't want to ruin anything for those of you who haven't read it and who find it kind of interesting and would like to pick it up. Let me just say that the author did an excellent job of wrapping up this series. You know, at the end it felt like I was saying goodbye and farewell to much beloved old friends. But this last book was phenomenal, and I really, really hated to see it end. Now, this is probably my all-time favorite series, and this is one that I may even consider rereading down the road. Heck, who am I kidding? I'm actually pretty certain that I'm going to end up rereading this at some point. So, if you follow this series, know that this final book will be released in January of 2019, and it is a very satisfying conclusion to the series, at least in my humble opinion. But if you haven't yet discovered Charlie Davidson, and if the premise of the story intrigues you, then you'll want to start with the first book, The First Grave on the Right. And let me tell you, it was hell each year waiting for the next book to come out. I imagine that I really don't need to say that I gave this book 5 stars. And I also want to give a huge grateful thank you to St. Martin's Press and to Dorinda Jones for providing me with an advanced reader copy of this book. Thank you very much. So that is it for my October wrap-up. Have you read any of these books? If so, what did you think? Also, what did you read in October? Let me know in the comments below. So that's it for now. As always, I thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of your support. Oh, and if you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you click the like button below, as it really helps me out. So that's it for now. Roger and out.